For these class athletes you're describing, which are most of us,
Mm-hmm.
when you're thinking of the things that bring the most benefit to, whether it's, I'm going to break it into 3 areas. I'll let you prioritize them for me.
Okay.
Movement, nutrition, and sleep. That's the trifecta of good health, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
How do you prioritize that, or help them, or try to help them prioritize? I know you can't force them, but how do you help them prioritize that?
I would actually add a 4th one to that. Sorry. We were talking about what goes on between the ears.
Yep.
And once again, that's universally scalable as well, right? So some people would call it mental health. I call it mental resilience. It's just a little bit more of a positive spin on that. I would add that into that kind of like basket of wellness, right? And that's a really tough question.
I'm asking for myself. That's all.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to figure out my own life here. You're like my shrink tonight. So if you help.
I think sleep is probably the most thing. And I'd say that I think nutrition is right behind it, because if your sleep and your nutrition are out of whack, on a hormonal level, like everything else is out of whack, right? So if your sleep is in a good place and your nutrition is in a good place, then we can hit those workouts with whatever the intensity is for the day, right? If your stress levels are contained, I'm not saying gone, because I don't think anybody lives a stress-free life. But if they're contained and you have a good grasp on how to quote unquote cope with that, I think the movement aspect just becomes the fruits of that labor, right? So, and you hear about people talk about 8 hours is the best amount of sleep and yada, yada, yada. But I think it really comes down to understanding what you're going through and being clear on that and honest with yourself about that, and then addressing it in the most appropriate way, right? If you're eating garbage and crushing margaritas 5 days a week, as much fun as that might be, your sleep's going to suffer. You're not going to want to move. Your mental health's going to go down the toilet. Like, it's just a bad place to be. And all 4 of those things, everybody has control over, right? We have control over the food we put in our body. We have control over our decision if we want to move or not. We have control over, most of the time, not with 2 small children all the time, but when we can go to bed and when we can wake up. And then the stress reduction stuff just comes down to understanding what works best for you, right? I think when people say that my stress reducer is the gym, I think that's a total and complete bullshit answer, because in a CrossFit gym, all we're doing is exposing you to stress, right?
Yep. Agree.
So, yeah, I would say sleep, nutrition, movement, mental resilience.
Yeah, the sleep thing's really interesting. You said it verbatim. Most people go, all right, 7 to 8 hours, that's what you need.
Mm-hmm.
But there's so much in that is true and not true. Yeah, 7 to 8 hours is great, but you need deep sleep. You need REM sleep. That's what you need.
Yep.
The time is important, but you need that. I was in bed last night for 7 hours, and I promise you it was not great rest, because I knew I had to be up at 5 a.m. and I knew I was
stressing out about that.
Yeah, I was stressing about it, and there was a thunderstorm going on. I was having these crazy dreams. It wasn't restful. It wasn't good recovery.
What temperature do you keep your house at?
I keep it cold. I have a huge routine around sleep. I can talk about this for hours. So I have blackout curtains in my room. Yep. So it's like pitch black.
Yep.
I keep it 67 to 68 degrees. Like, it's pretty chilly in there for the most part. Real quiet. There's no noise going on in the house at all. My kids are old, so much older than yours. And I learned a couple of years ago that once I fixed sleep, it unlocked huge doors for me as a master's athlete.
It's a superpower, man.
Yeah, it really is. That, like, I tell most people if you really want to unlock something as a master's athlete, there's 2 things you need to do that are bigger than everything else, and they start unlocking other doors. But if you can start getting good sleep and really focus on it, which means you have to get up in the morning, get morning sun, because it makes you sleep better at night. You got to turn off what I'm doing right now is not good. You got to get out in front of the screens and and blue blocker glasses, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. I'm looking at mine right now. They're right over there.
Yeah, it's tough. So you gotta, there's a lot of little things you have to do to make sure you're getting good sleep.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you really want to do it, you got to cut out alcohol. You got to cut it out because, man, like every drink, I read something, it was Huberman or somebody was talking about this. So every drink, if you don't drink at all, you're going to get, we'll call it 3 hours of REM sleep.
Mm-hmm.
If you have one drink, you're going to get 2 hours. If you have two drinks, you're going to get 1 hour. It gets cut dramatically. If you have three drinks, you're going to get none.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're done. You get no recovery at that point. You know,
that's why you wake up in the morning, you feel like crap. Right?
Yeah. And so there's a lot of little things that go into this that start to compound. It's almost like, I'm a banker, so I relate a lot of stuff to finance, but it's like compounding interest. There's not one thing you can do to get rich. You need time. And there's
Mm-hmm.
about 100 little things you have to do. And to get good sleep, there's, I'll call it 10 things that really make sleep happen the way you need it to happen. Fraser was the master at this. Like, notoriously, I saw an interview with him the other day. This is what made me think, yep, this is why I know I'm right. His story was, he was talking to his coach and he's training his ass off as only Fraser can. And his coach is like looking around the room going, you're not training any harder than anybody else. Mm-hmm. And Fraser's like, well, how am I going to be the best? And he's like, you're going to recover better than everyone else because no one else in this room is willing to go to bed at 7:00 and to nuance their diet and all these little things you've mentioned. And that's what made him the 5-time champ, was that he was like, there's so many stories about him that have come out to where he was just crazy about his sleep and his rest, almost to the point where it's, you think about it, like how it impacts your family. And Tim's this way. I've literally tried to get Tim on the podcast a dozen times. He's been on several times and he's great every time. But he's like, bro, we got to do it at 6 p.m. because I'm going to bed at 7. I'm like, are you kidding me? He's like, no, I'm not kidding. I'm going to bed at 7:00. I'm like, all right.
There's times that I'll send him a message at 8 p.m. like, because like something comes up. I'm thinking of something for the gym and I won't get a message until 5:00 the next morning. And I'm like, oh, right. Yeah. He's asleep.
I believe that completely. I'm actually kind of excited that he's retiring because I might actually get him on the show at some point past 7 p.m.
We'll see about that.
Yeah, maybe we'll see.
We'll see about that.
What's when you think of getting rid of the stress, like the between the ears piece you mentioned, what are your kind of 1 or 2 big tips for that?
Man, I think most people don't understand where their stress comes from, right? I'm going to pitch an organization, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So there's an organization called Between the Ears. They work with street parking. They work with a number of organizations. They were out at the ranch a little while ago, and it's Bill and Carianne Anthes. Carianne was a level 4 flow master. Bill was on staff. They owned CrossFit Morristown for a while. Bill's now a clinical therapist. He's actually my clinical therapist. And former SF, Army SF guy, like him and his wife are just fantastic people. And they run a seminar called Between the Ears. And not saying that this is the route that everybody takes, but one of the things they do is like everything that we do within CrossFit is with intention, right? So before a workout, you kind of have to write that intention out. What are you expecting to do here? So all that to say, I think things like journaling are fantastic. With my wellness clients, one of the things I have them do if they're like having a hard time with something is right before bed, I call it the offload. They're basically going to take whatever's milling through their head and just write it down, right? Because that will take it from your brain, put it on a piece of paper, and I don't have to worry about that anymore. I can wake up tomorrow morning and look at this piece of paper and be like, okay, this is what I need to do to attack these things, right? I think diaphragmatic breathing does a really great job of down regulating and understanding how to do that. There's a billion, maybe not a billion, but there's a lot of YouTube videos on diaphragmatic breathing. Stress reduction. not eating like shit. Um,
As fun as it may be.
and it's you know what? I'm a 80-20 kind of guy where I'm not Captain No Fun. I competed at the Asbury Park Summer Games over the weekend, last weekend.
Yep.
And I was back in New Jersey. So I was hanging out with some friends and I had a couple drinks and I woke up on Monday and I was like, I feel like dog shit.
Yeah, my ankles feel like hell. Yes,
Yeah.
I know that feeling.
Yeah. So, I'm not, like I said, I'm not Captain No Fun, but like when you know you have something coming up or you need to focus on it, like journaling is a great method. Breathing is the way to kind of like center everything, right? And bring everything back to your chi or whatever. And then controlling what you can control, right? So as a dad of 2 young kids, I don't always have control over my schedule. So giving myself some grace if I need to get a workout in, being able to like, hey, I'm supposed to have this 60 minutes of training, but I've got 30. Okay, well, what are the most important pieces here? And not stress about it, right? It's just life. You're not going to get less fit because you did 30 less minutes of workout, right?
Right.
I think specifically Americans are really hard on themselves as to what the expectation of everybody else is of them versus what their own expectations are of them, right? So,
Well, we have this corporate 40-hour work week that the rest of the world doesn't recognize, and it almost makes you want to leave the U.S.
makes you want to move to Europe.
I think the power of journaling for me is no different than if you think about if you're using like MyFitnessPal or some macro tracker, right?
Mhm.
And you start tracking your food and you're looking at calories and macros. And over time, if you do it long enough, you really start to see the trends in your body, right? Particularly if you're weighing yourself every day. And if you really look at it, and maybe I'm wired differently, like I'm just really anal about numbers and I look for trends, and you can start to notice, wow, I ate that and the water weight changed in my body this day. And so,
Mhm.
and you start to figure that out, and you start to see like how it shifts during the week. And the power that comes from that is understanding what food's doing to your body, where journaling is no different. If you're tracking or writing down how stressed you were in traffic or what your day at work was like, or your kids are yelling at you or whatever is going on in your life, you do that long enough, you start to connect those things. You're like, that's the trigger,
Mhm.
whatever that may be. And it could be anything. Like today, I was on the turnpike for 3 hours. And that's a pretty easy trigger to figure out because the turnpike sucks, like when you're
Mhm.
driving. But not everybody recognizes that. And so the power of journaling is really, really unreal to understand what it does for you. And I think often, particularly you mentioned Americans, so those of us as Americans, we don't think about the compounding pressure that the stress is putting on your body and what it does to the rest of you
Mhm.
over time. And stress is a killer. It makes your workouts worse.
It's a literal killer.
Yeah, gives you heart
Like,
attacks.
it'll give you a heart attack, right? I like to focus a lot of my attention on things that I can control, which are my words, my actions, my feelings towards things, and creating a little bit of understanding. But that's not like something you can't just tell somebody that, right? That's
Right.
a practice. Being aware of what you're doing and saying to others is also another way to reduce your stress.